Hello everybody, well, what is that thing? Ah yes, it's me riding my pedal race car called Hayabusa. Well, the strange nickname comes from a suggestion by my friends who stated that this very car belonging to an old cartoon back in the 80s, a Japanese cartoon, has something in common by the aesthetics point of view. However, this one is the very first drawing of the car how I was going to intend it. It is something like a velomobile adapted to the rules of the Formula One pedal car here in Italy. The pictures you are seeing now refer to the first drawing, the first design carried along together with my friend Marco Ruga. As you can see, it's more or less like a conventional tadpole trike, but with two wheels on the backside, connected by one axle and supports. So of course we have to prepare two rear wheels. As you can see, I had to assemble them just because it is quite hard to find pre-assembled front wheels with 15 millimeters hole in the hub. That's because these hubs are made for tough mountain bikes, and these are the special support with bearings, very light at 160 grams, thanks to my friend Daniele who suggests them. So judging by how the design of the frame is made, why not start directly from a conventional used trike? This is a KMX Typhon with quite a tough frame, and this is the beginning of the works. You can see the pinion pack welded onto the rear axle. This picture shows it before being shortened. It is a 15 millimeters inox solid shaft, so that it can hold the whole weight of the rear on those two bearings, ball bearings. And then you can see that I am moving the shaft itself closer to the rear side of the frame in order to check how I could connect the parts. The better solution I found was to use a piece of aluminium tube, square tube, rectangular tube, so that I could simply screw the two supports onto the rear fork and support the whole shaft that way. Of course, the derailleur had to be repositioned, and that was my bigger trouble. That's because I couldn't use the very same holes where the conventional rear wheel is screwed at, because the shaft is bigger and of course it turns, it spins. So I built this support made by aluminium profiles, and unfortunately, despite it was well toughened, I had some trouble with this support because it was quite elastic and tended to jump from one gear to another too easily while riding, for example on bumps, holes, etc. However, as a first test, it worked. As you can see from these pictures, you can notice that the position of the pinion pack is quite well aligned with the derailleur, and the angle of the chain wound up onto the pinions is decent. Okay, here you can see I'm just trying to put together the support, looking for the right measures where to drill two big holes, 10 millimeters diameter, so that I could put two big screws by each side. Since the screws had to push against the frame itself, I decided to use a partially threaded screw so that the cylindrical part could just receive all the weight, all the stress, the mechanical stress onto the screw itself. It's not very orthodox for using a screw in this way, but actually it worked, and being the screw over-dimensioned at a double screw with screws with 10 millimeters diameter, it actually worked. Here you can see the final assembling of the supports. In the next picture you will not see it because it was not mounted yet, but I added a small plate in order not to squeeze the original frame of the trike and damaging it or moving it out of square. Alright, next pictures show how I could change the original 38 teeth front spur to 56 teeth. Just drilled a series of holes and screwed a new one onto it. Alright, now we can see the first look of the mechanical part only. I think it's quite appealing. It's funny as a shape. Wasn't it for the rules of the races, I may have kept it as it is. But actually I liked a lot to ride with a body covering me. So I simply went on. You may notice I've added an aluminium pipe on the bottom. That's just to hold in place the bottom made out of coroplast. All the body is made out of coroplast and aluminium profiles. You can see here the back side where I had to cut to leave a place for the derailleur. And in this very picture you can notice how I started to shape the body itself. I heated up with a heat gun carefully, not to pierce through the plastic, the front of the coroplast body, and I glued it with a series of small tabs with neoprenic glue onto the very bottom, and added here and there some reinforcement made out of aluminium. Speaking of aluminium, here we have 4 beams. I had to screw because the rules of these races ask for a rear bumper. So these are the supports. I immediately fitted them in order to see what room they will take. And here you can see the inside of the body with another aluminium profile that will give the shape of the flanks and the top. Right, this very picture shows simply that the radius I gave to the aluminium profile by coincidence is the very same as the rear wheel. And now I am applying the aluminium profile to the inside of the body with glue and a series of self-tapping screws. And here you can notice how the body is going to be shaped. Now the position of the side beams separates a cylindrical vertical nose, nearly cylindrical, with a portion of a cylinder to complete the shape of the upper side of the body. Now in this picture you can see that I had to check carefully if the measures I took are fine for fitting inside the body without touching with knees or shoes, etc. Unfortunately, to stay by the side of safety and not having troubles with interference, of course I ended up making a slightly bigger body than I could, but in any case the distance from the ground of feet, shoulders and knees is nearly the same, so I thought that it was good to go straight. Alright, now you can see how I strengthen a bit the rear side of the body box in order to keep it stiff while riding. These two cross light beams are made to keep the distance of the upper aluminium profiles. Now I'm starting to apply the sides of the body. Of course, this is not, of course, the definitive shape, but as I said before, I started by a rough design, and then I had to discover how to strengthen and put together parts along the way. Now I nearly finished the rear bumper, and this picture is not actually advertising about the heat gun for the glue, but it's just to point out that beyond the neoprenic glue, the hot glue works very fine with coroplast. Alright, the shape is starts to take its final appearance, and in the next picture you will see how I modified the rear side. Now it looks more or less like a 100 years old car, just to give the right angles and abruptly cut the shape. That's because the length of the body, according to the rules, is not long enough to close with the right angles, in order to prevent that the airflow is detached from the sides of the body well before the body ends. So better give a neat cut and make so that the aerodynamic is as good as possible till the actual back side of the body. You can see I closed the top and started building the fairing for the head. Yes, that's true. It looks really like a coffin. This is the inside of the cover. You can see I added some reinforcements, all made by V-shaped coroplast pieces, again glued with hot glue or neoprenic glue, and held in place with a series of small nylon straps, the ones that are currently used by electricians, because I noticed that this particular kind of build helps a lot with toughness and lightness together. Well, this picture just shows how I protected my hands by direct airflow, not really needed for racing, but in cold weather it turned out to be very, very good. You can see here from the inside I decided to make things simpler, not to change from the direct steering to a central steering wheel, so I had to cut the sides of the body, and my arms act as a radiator after all. Here you may notice the little cord in the middle. It is helpful both to keep the upper cover closed and to keep it open without over-tipping to the front. And finally, here we have the whole car taken out of the garage for the first time. It's not definitive at all. There is some more work to do. You may notice that big fairing just behind the place where my head will rest. It is again devised to improve aerodynamics of all the parts exposed to direct airflow as good as possible, if possible. Okay, next picture we'll see both how well the airflow will be sliced on the two sides and on the upper side of the body, and you may notice the little spoiler at the bottom, who should help to cut into two the airflow, I mean into the part that will run below the body and the part that will run on the sides. Here another shot where you can see I added a small transparent screen shaped in order to direct the airflow around my head, and I must say it works. So I don't have a direct strong wind in my face, and the airflow should run around my helmet and get along the rear big aerodynamic fairing. Here you can see I added the lights, both for night races and for street and for being legal on the street. And I stop a while on this detail because here you can see a PVC pipe that turned out to be very good as a solution to hold the front lights. But if I had to go back and restart building the body again, here you can see the rear light, I think I will replace many parts of aluminium with these pipes because they turn out to be very good. And here finally you can see the livery. Yes, it's the brother of Herbie, the love bug. I bet you all know. This is just because my team leader Marco decided very cleverly to assign number 53 to his car. So he's Herbie's nephew, and this is the brother. I must say that despite the squared, really a mix of alien and retro and vintage look, the adding of the colors and decorations, in my opinion, make it a little more racing and somehow acceptable as by the aesthetics point of view. Speaking about aesthetics, it's a cloud in an eye to see those small 16 inches wheels at the front. I know I should replace them with 20 inches like the rear ones, even to get better smoothness of ride and less friction. But I was able to find some high pressure rated tires that turned out to be quite good from the point of view of drag. So as to make things quicker and simpler, I started retaining the original trike wheels. Next picture show the final appearance of the first version. I made some further upgrades in the meantime along the championship. I will talk about them just a little later. And now have a look at my mascot. I bet you know that smile because every one of us has used it thousands of times. It makes it a little more funny to see the car despite the really weird rear view. Alright, so here we start with some modifications and upgrades. You will see two small pieces of aluminium where the rear view mirrors are placed. This helped both in transportation and in high-speed descents because the cover tended to fall inside the body because of air pressure and the elasticity of the sides. Well, here you can see I made, again out of Coroplast, a guide for the chain, having a single spur on the front. I suffer from falling of the chain out of a place due to bumps, holes, etc. This totally solved with a few grams added the problem. Here I stop for a while to show you the new position and new mount of the rear derailleur. I have some little problems pushing hard in high gears because the angle of wrapping of the chain around the pinions is not perfect, but I improved the pinion pack to a wider range from 11 to 34 teeth. And I make you notice here one more detail I didn't talk about in the beginning. There's a small flange at the end of the axle extremities that uses the 6 holes of the disc brake to actually transmit the movement from the axle to the wheels. That's the reason why we choose those hubs and those wheels to make this kind of transmission. Okay, you may have noticed here is that the rear derailleur with this new mount is very close to the ground. It may be a problem if I had to ride off-road, but being this a race car made for road races, it's not a problem at all. Another little improvement, again about the transmission, is this bigger wheel mounted in a much higher position that helped doing away with a guide tube, so that the overall friction and the wasted power along the transmission has become less relevant, and I can hopefully get a little bit faster. Here you can see the adding of another PVC tube to strengthen the sides of the body, even because some stupid unknown man who found the car unattended tried to get in and squeezed the coroplast sides. In this, the coroplast is good to be light, to be strong enough for the needs of withstanding the airflow, but of course lightness and cheapness has a price. You may also see in this picture my cockpit in the most recent appearance. It has a new seat that helped sparing nearly 2 kilograms compared to the original KMX-1. And this other picture shows a little aesthetic improvement I made to the rear side. Now the cut is a little less neat, and you can see it resembles just slightly more an old school race car. And here you can see me racing on the tracks. I tried to make all the races I could along this championship, which is the first one for me. Here you can see my car's body, which is actually a lot different from other racers. That's because, as I said in the beginning, I tried to make it as similar as possible to a velomobile with wheels out due to the rules, and with a shortened body because of the rules, who asked for 2.3 meters long body. Speaking about comparison, here is my team leader car. He likes to make it bodies very more adherent to his own body, but he started from quite a different trike, so he has had the opportunity to keep everything lower, while my car is far higher. But the aerodynamics turned out to be very similar in the test that we made along the race season. This should let you understand why my dear friends call me the man in the coffin at the races, because actually it looks like a coffin. Here I'm racing through a S-turn into a descent, and I say goodbye to everybody with this last picture, where I think I show that I really want to race, and I really love to build. I have loved to build this car for racing in this awesome category, which is Formula 1 on pedals in Italy. Bye to everybody.